This is the Authority Company podcast, conversations with leaders that are building our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today I've got John Spencer Taylor, the author of Change the Box. Now, John is a tech CEO, runs a very successful technology company, but he wrote this book about how small changes can make big impacts, and he is speaking my language. He is singing my song. So we're going to get into the inspiration for the book, talk about, of course, AI and what it means to change the box. Spence, welcome to the Authority Company podcast. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I am fantastic. And Spence, I've been working in business podcasts for like 5 years. So I've gotten used to the acronyms and the cliches and the tired phrases. And I love how your book, Change the Box, goes right after one of those cliches, which is thinking outside the box. Before we get started, are there any of those annoying businessisms that you hear all the time that you're like, please, let's retire that?
I'm done with circle back and synergy, and I think there's enough internet memes that I'm not alone in that. So, just let's get rid of them all.
Good. So when you change the box, obviously, we kind of know where you're going, but let's get to the why of changing the box, because we all know that I think especially now, since technology and the access of information we have within the touch of our fingers, that all of this stuff just can get recycled and regurgitated till it's ad nauseum. And we kind of started this conversation by how nauseous we are about it. But why was it important for you to change the box?
I think there's too often people say, "Oh, if we're going to innovate, we truly have to just throw everything away," or you come into a problem, a challenge, and you say, "This isn't working, so it's all bad." Throw the baby out with the bathwater. And, as a corporate philosophy, as a way of acting, myself and my co-founders, we just said, look, usually when you walk into a problem, whatever in the solution space has been happening, some amount of that is working. And we ought to take just a second, to figure out what that was. We take the rest of the hour figuring out what we need to do different. But when you just reset everything back to zero, you don't ever get back to 100%. So if you want to get to 100%, you've got to leave a certain amount on the table to work with.
And you come from the world of technology. You founder of BrainGu, which is, boy, here, speaking of acronyms here, John, DevSecOps platform. What the hell does that mean?
DevSecOps, so it's the development, security, and operations all smashed together because, man, you just couldn't have enough of one. You got to have all three. It's the Neapolitan ice cream of the technology space. And we're just trying to make it easier for people to build software in a secure way and deliver that in a highly regulated industry. That's usually not fun. That's usually something where everything gets thrown out. I think lots of people are familiar with these IT projects that fail. They lose you data. They take 15 years. And we just thought there's got to be a better way. So we're trying to help the people who do that every day be more successful at it.
And in the terms of technology, I know it can be said that if you work in tech, there is a check the box culture to it, because we have to keep track of tasks and projects and all that jazz. As a leader, how do you bring in like EQ and soft skills in a world that is heavily tied into checking these boxes? Because I often say, when you have a check the box culture, you don't have a culture, because basically people are just going through the motions. So how do you integrate those two? Because I know in your world, those boxes that are unchecked can be incredibly dangerous. So I don't want to take that lightly, but how do you marry those two concepts?
Yeah, you've got to, especially again in highly regulated industry, you've got to take those box checks very seriously, but they're not the whole story. And we're not just checking the box to check the box. The technology isn't for the computers, it's for people, right? So we spend a lot of time and energy looking at, in our performance, three facets, one of which is execution. And that's, the technology piece, the nerdy stuff. The rest is EQ. We have the second pillar is diplomacy. That's how do we interact with the outside world? How do we think when we're delivering our technology that's going to land for people and negotiate trade space? So, sometimes when you're changing the box, people don't want their box changed. They might need it, but it's not always an easy conversation. So you got to be delicate about that. You got to be understanding, and you got to work through it. The third one is citizenship, which is, are you a good teammate? Are you thinking and working together with the person to your left and to your right? Are you creating a collaborative workspace, or are you, throwing everything off the table because we didn't do it your way? That's 2/3 on the EQ side and 1/3 on the, the tech side, because it takes the people part so much more than anyone really gives it credit for to get the tech across the finish line.
I love that. And, one of the things I love about the book too is, and I've always been a proponent of this, is like, celebrating small wins, small changes. And in the book, you write about the smallest change possible with the biggest impact. Because for a lot of people, you mentioned the baby with the bathwater cliche. It's always like big changes, big sweeping changes, but it's those small incremental changes that have the longest impact, right? And that's what sort of you write about in the book.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people been asking me, hey, Spencer, you're a pretty technical guy. Is the book a bunch of, nerdy software stuff? And I was like, no, it's really a lot about the people and the process and how you bring those things together to get those impacts. Because who are you impacting? Again, it's not the tech, it's the people.
And when you mentioned asking people, like, is this a tech book? Is this a tech centric book, like in terms of the audience, or is this something that obviously technology plays a role in everything nowadays. Although I have a friend of mine who hates when they say, if you're a company now, you have to be a technology company. He hates that phrase. But in terms of like the reader, is it someone who really needs to be involved heavily in tech, or can anyone really embrace this book?
I think anyone can. A lot of the stories that we tell have some technology pieces to them, but you don't have to be a technology person. That's just, we're anchoring some of the anecdotes in our experience, which is technical. But really, anybody who's trying to innovate, um, there's an audience for that here in the book. And we try very hard not to go into any of the deep tech. It's just, it's the background canvas that I'm painting on. Uh, it doesn't have to be for every reader.
Oh, cool. And what do you think about that? Because I have my friend who's in technology, and it like makes his skin crawl when he says, "If you're a company, you have to be a technology." It to him, it drives him crazy because, like, no, because if you're like a bread maker, you make bread. You're not a tech company. You may use technology in terms of marketing or making the bread, but you're a bread company. What do you think about that mindset of like every company should have this tech company mindset?
I don't buy into it exactly. Yeah, in the modern world, every company needs software. They need the internet. They need digital marketing. Those are technology things, and you've got to have a technology aspect to it. But you don't want to be a technology company. If you're trying to be the best clothing line, you're trying to be the best bread baker. Don't make it about the bits and bytes. Make it about what you're good at. And I think it's too easily lost. So I'm with your buddy there.
Yeah, cool. In the book, you talk about don't fight gravity in evaluating solutions. So, okay, it's a great line because it's one of those things where we get it. Like just by those the few simple words, don't fight gravity. But what do you mean by fighting gravity when it comes to solutions?
So you can kind of take that on whatever your what I call a context window. What are the people that you're changing? Is it the software that you're changing? Is it only going in a team? Is it let's say in the interest of a baker, are you a big scale warehousing baker or are you just local community baker? Whatever that is, if you want to change out that bread, how many people is it going to impact and what are they buying like crazy? If you're going to make that change and everyone's like, hey, I don't want raisins in my cinnamon toast, and you put raisins in there, you're probably fighting gravity, right? It might be fun, it might be creative, it might be like all the best bakers are doing it, but you're not going to win in the you create the impact you want with that group. So when I say don't fight gravity, it's like take a look around. What's pulling down on everything in your solution space, and don't fight it. Let that be a part of what you don't change on the box.
Hmm. And speaking of changes, let's talk culture here because one of the things that I often say about mankind is we are incredible at overcorrection. We don't only correct, we overcorrect till something is dead. And I'm going to tie this into technology and culture with the pandemic. If you recall, John, was not too long ago. Even though it was funny, I was talking to my wife a few days ago because like there was like a scene in a movie or something where someone was wearing a mask. I'm like, do you remember that? It seems like 1,000 years ago, but it's 5 years ago. But what happened 5 years ago was most technology leaders were like, we are a 100% remote company. Everybody can work from anywhere in the world. And then that was great during the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, these and this is the way I look at it. All these CEOs and leaders looked around their multi-million-dollar headquarters, are like, yes, it's really empty in here. We should probably have some people inside of this building. And then all of a sudden, we are now a 100% in office workforce. So the whiplash goes over pretty quickly. So tell me about that change in your industry, and obviously in a lot of industries when it came to remote work. But technology, the tech industries really, really embraced that. Maybe you could tell us, go behind the scenes with your crew, or just in general, in terms of like this shift from remote work to no remote work.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing for us, in that moment in 2020 as the world was shutting down. Uh, BrainGu, since its founding in 2012, we had this policy we called remote first, which is, uh, not remote only. And so we had to go remote only. And it's interesting when you look at people who were sort of hired in during that mode, and now we got back out of it. We're going back to remote first, which means sometimes we're going to get together. We had just this year a couple of really great get-togethers with different teams because there is something undeniable. I'm a CEO, and I feel this with the other CEOs. There is some magic to getting smart people in the same room to jam on whatever the problem is, and just, break bread with them, have coffees and lunches and dinners and whatever it is that you don't get when everybody's spread across the world. But we couldn't do all of those, like get together for dinner, get together for collab sessions at that time. And I felt like we lost a little bit of our creative spark. And I think the world's kind of feeling that and trying to, as you say, like overcorrect that pendulum swing back to like, oh, now we got to go 100% back to the office. We're resisting that, right? We have a handful of what we call collaboration hubs, and those are available. If people want to go, they can. If teams kind of opt to get together, they've got some big thing they want to jam on, they can do that. We're not going to force anybody back. That from our founding, we wouldn't have done it, and now we're not going to do it. So when I see all these companies going back 100%, I'm thinking that they're missing an opportunity to kind of like ride the middle.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because you've been working in offices and collaborating with large teams pretty much your entire adult life. So one thing I've seen since transitioning to more of a corporate structure is that CEOs and people that read a lot of business development books love this idea of the random meeting in the by the water cooler, running into each other, jumping into someone's office. But if you think about it, in places where there is this culture where everyone's in the office, that's really does not exist. Like, I've walked into offices where all I see is people staring at a screen, and they usually have AirPods or headphones on, and you don't even know whether they're in a meeting, listening to a podcast, or actually doing work. So this has always been sort of a thing I've gotten a high horse over the last couple of years, is the fact that, yes, the idea of having everyone work in an office is great, but the fact that we're so married to the technologies we work with, it almost seems like, what's the point of them all being sales if all the person is going to do is just be staring at a screen, not looking up, and maybe randomly running into someone at the bathroom or the water cooler or coffee machine. So tell me about that. Like, maybe it's something you guys do, because to me, I find that fascinating. Like, in terms of, yes, the idea, to me, I've always been a people person, so I love being able to run into people. But I'll even find this going into offices where I'm like, I'd love to say hi to someone, but I don't even know if I can, Spence, because they look like they're really into something, or they're maybe on a Zoom call. So what do you say to that?
You've got to be intentional. If you want to have that community experience that was maybe somewhat more natural 5, 10 years ago before we had all the Zoom meetings, uh, you know, you've got to curate it. And so if that's let's literally put a hold on everyone's calendar for 90 minutes at the middle of the day and say, we're bringing in lunch, get your lunch in or order in by 11. And hey, from noon to whatever, you don't have to come. You can just grab the sandwich and go or whatever it is, but you're welcome. And in our spaces, we have communal tables and the kinds of things where it's like, I'm going to go and sit there. I'm not going to schedule another meeting. I'm going to sit there myself and eat my lunch. And if someone else wants to join me, then I would love for that opportunity to take place. I'm not going to force anybody. And usually what happens is, unless there's something crazy going on, everybody loves to like have that moment, but you got to start by showing that it's okay, and you got to participate in it because you got to practice what you preach.
Yeah, I love that word intentional too, because I think because the other lever of that, there's remote all in office, and then there's the hybrid model. And I feel the one thing that people are missing with the hybrid model is that intentionality, because they will just see it as, okay, hybrid means you come into the office 2 days a week. But if those 2 days of the week, you're not really doing anything that sort of motivates inspiration or togetherness, we're going back to checking the boxes, Spence. It's just like, oh, we're doing hybrid for the sake of hybrid because, like I mentioned, we got this big fancy building and these desks are empty, so let's do it there. And then all of a sudden, you have people just coming into their office doing exactly what they do at home, staring at the screen, and then when 5 o'clock comes around, they leave. So tell me about how you and maybe some advice for people that have hybrid workforces that like, hey, let's not just make hybrid mean you have to come into the office so you could stare at your screen and leave.
Yeah, we didn't realize how, um, I'm going to use the word insidious, the video conferencing culture had become until we had the opportunity to kind of come back and say like, hey, we should all, like let's all get together and kind of like, jam on a couple of ideas and maybe grab lunch and whatever. Everybody was in the office and they were all quiet. It was dead quiet in there. And it was like, what are we doing? You look, and just like you say, that person's got their headphones on, and that person's in a video call. That person's, yeah, well, why did we bother? And so, going back to intentionality, we kind of had we have a big retrospective culture at BrainGu. So we were like, all right, well, this was a sort of an experiment post COVID that we're going to come in and hang out. What did we learn and what did we like? What did we didn't like? And everybody was like, we wanted the opportunity for community, but we didn't seize the opportunity for community. So we got to do something different. And one of the things that we learned was like, we'll block calendars, not just for lunch, but we'll block calendars and say, you know, there needs to be a 2 hour pocket of no meeting time so that we can have this like local in office experience. And we've had people say, oh, we can't make it, but I want to remote in. No, it's in office only so that that in-person community thing can happen, because you get a completely different dynamic when you've got, three people around a table and two people on a call.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's funny, as I'm thinking this, I always do the devil's advocate thing, Spence. So someone may be watching or listening to this, and they're probably a CEO or in a company, and they're listening to the actions that you've taken, and they'll come away like, Spence, that sounds like a real pain in the ass. Business is hard. I'm not trying to make a buck here. I'm trying to make sure I make a buck and people are happy working here. All this other stuff you're talking about, Spence, geez, that sounds really hard.
It is. And you're not wrong to assess it that way. It's just, um, lean as much as you can on the team to help come up with those ideas. That retrospective culture I talk about, I don't have to come up with good ideas because everybody's going to tell me what went wrong and what they want to do different, right? Change the box. What are the smallest changes we can make with the biggest impact? We do that every day. My team is super happy to tell me how we need to do it different. And so I get to kind of say, yeah, all right, let's try that. Let's try that. Let's try that. And you guys get to help me now. And so, as a CEO, don't think you got to do it alone. If you've got a team and they want to see it made better, they're going to help you do it. Just give them the opportunity.
That's great. Like most companies, you all live by the Billy Bean Moneyball adage, adapt or die, and you guys turn adapt or die into innovate. And innovation can sometimes be, like we're talking about the culture piece, can be pretty hard because first you're always trying to like, hey, what's the niche we're doing? What are we doing? Let's make sure we do that really well. But then sometimes people get bogged down in like, okay, how could we do well better? They always say the enemy of good is great and stuff like that. But still, for most companies, they can't just, it's like, yeah, without getting into the Zuckerberg of it all, Mark Zuckerberg didn't stand pat by just creating this portal to people to connect friends. All of a sudden, it's developed into things and acquisitions and stuff. So that's the idea of innovation in tech. But like, what makes tech innovation or just an innovation in general that you've seen, Spence? What are some of the obstacles to that? Is it just that mindset of like, man, let's just do what we're doing, and because this is working out okay? But what are some of the other obstacles when it comes to innovating within a company?
I think it's that resistance to change, right? Change carries a certain amount of risk. And I think as humans, we're not as good at assessing risk as we think we are. We can identify it pretty well, but we don't always know, is this a little risk or is this a big risk? And since we can't really easily get there on, what's the magnitude of risk, we say, let's eliminate it rather than mitigate it. And, unless you kind of sit down and work with your team on what change are we making? How is it going to impact us? And what are the risks? And that, let's all talk it out so that we understand what we're agreeing to. You're going to have a much harder time because people who don't understand, don't feel comfortable, they're not going to come along with it. They might not fight it actively, but they're also not going to support it actively. And that's what you really need if you want to innovate.
And in a company like yourself, that is a DevSecOps company, I know that, is the idea of that, there's a lot of dangerous shit that you guys are working on. It's very important. So how do you have that two-track mind of we've got to keep our eye on the prize and making sure our clients are protected and our teams are protected, but also we have to look 1, 2, 3 years down the line. How do you do that?
You know, just to wind the clock back a little bit, when we were founded in 2012, DevSecOps wasn't quite the buzzword, and it was cybersecurity automation, and a lot of people in the industry considered it sort of heresy. If cybersecurity was going to be done right to protect the computers from bad, hacker types, we need the good hacker types to sit behind there and with the hoodie up, do it all, and you know they perceived some of the folks in the industry perceived all that risk of, well, what if we bring in these automations and they either don't work or they, do something weird and shut down the network. And there was a lot of unknowns and uncertainty. And so, when we first came on the scene, people were like, I don't want what you're selling. That sounds bad. And now it's a buzzword and everybody gets it. It's important. And one of the big things that changed was that the industry got made aware of this, cyber threats out there that are going to get into your network and pivot in under 15 minutes. How likely is it that you're awake when the bad guy's awake and you're going to catch that and you're going to remediate it in 15 minutes? Turns out automation can work faster for you. So, you know, what's really the answer to that question? That's our story there about how it changed for us was, what is the risk you're taking if you do nothing? And we don't always explore that. Keeping a steady state sounds like it's zero risk, but it almost never is. And most people won't ask themselves that question. So I'm always asking, what happens, good and bad, if we make no changes? Because if the good outweighs the bad, let's make no changes, right? Let's change the box. Let's keep what's working. But if there's a chance that someone's going to get into your network in under 15 minutes and the computer can fix itself faster than you can, let's make the change.
Hmm. All right. So you are a tech entrepreneur, a rather successful one. This is a business podcast. You wrote a business book. We are legally obligated to discuss AI. We just have to. If not, the feds are going to knock down our doors and going to come
Yeah.
in here like, you guys must discuss AI. And so I don't want to talk about this. What's the future of AI look like? All this, but I want to talk about in terms of just those two letters, because as much as it's become this big hype word since ChatGPT a year plus ago came out, I have to keep reminding people that artificial intelligence has been around forever. And if you think about it, an algorithm is artificial intelligence. Amazon telling you 5 years ago what to buy is artificial intelligence. Google giving you ideas for searches is artificial intelligence. So I don't know. So tell me about how you embrace this idea, because since it's been around forever, and then all of a sudden everyone wants to talk. I'm sure every party you went to over the last 6 months, John, when you when you were with somebody else, they were saying, "Hey, let's talk about this AI thing. Oh, DeepSeek. How about China, huh?" But like in terms of the fact that AI has always been here, it's changed. Obviously, it's now more user friendly. It's more public facing, but it's always here, and it probably plays a huge part in your company since day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, artificial intelligence, and when you think about it more algorithmically, folks might call it machine learning. But the reality is, why it's public discourse is just as you said. It got more user friendly. Someone figured out how to put it into the hands of the everyman, and that is great. I mean, it's really amazing. Um, we've been working. You have these folks with these great comp sci degrees and self-taught backgrounds in wicked mathematics and all those kinds of things that work at BrainGu. And those folks have been leveraging this stuff and gaining a lot of great value out of it for years. But it's never been simple for anybody to, just punch up the website and get something cool out of it. So Uh, like what I think in business is, again, kind of like what we talked about for the book. People are like, well, that AI, it sounds like it's tech, and that I'm not really a tech person. Don't think that way, right? It's a tool. If you're not afraid of having a laptop and an email and Microsoft Excel, don't be afraid of having AI, because that's going to be one more tool in your toolkit to work faster, work smarter. And um, just like any of us who were around when, you know, laptops were a thing that became commonplace, and it wasn't just stuck to our desk, and we could travel with it. And, pre and post mobile phones, uh, you know, we have to adapt or die, right? And so AI is one of those things. Start using it now. It might not be the best. You might not be able to use it in your everyday workflow, but by the time it is 100% ready to do everything for you, you do not want to be just getting started. You want to already have it kind of like an idea of where it can help you every day.
Yeah, that's good stuff. It's funny with the AI in terms of like business and like real life, because I think, as you know, sometimes Spence, like the acronyms and words people use in business speak, like regular people, like, what are you even talking about? It's all like gobbledygook. And what I find funny about the AI thing is, like, a year ago or so, there was like a survey and they asked people, about these products. What do you think about a product that says it's AI enabled? And I think it was like a downgrade to people. Like, people were so turned off by the idea that this product that they were being surveyed on was AI enabled. I think it was like they were less likely to buy something. They said it was AI because, again, regular people are like, yeah, I don't even know what any of that means. Like, I know it's like Chat GPT and stuff like that, but it means nothing to me. So how do you marry that in the business world? Because I talk to people in the VC and startup world, and they say all the time, if AI is not like within the first few words of your pitch, companies don't, investors want nothing to do with it. But then you go into the real world and, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't care. That doesn't matter. So how do you marry those two within the consumer and the creator?
Yeah. You know, on the creator side, we do sometimes fall in love with our technologies, and we can be myopic and think that is the value proposition, is like, I thought this was super cool. And so everyone's going to think this is super cool. And then what you have to do is step back from the consumer side. What is the value proposition? Yeah, it's got AI, but why do I care? You know? Um, so if the thing as an end user is, I'm going to get my responses faster. Maybe something was going to take 24 to 48 hours to process, and now I can get it in 24 to 48 minutes. Well, that sounds great, at the same cost, or even some people would be willing to pay a premium for that expedited service. You don't have to say anything about it's done with AI, because that, what does it matter? I get that it matters to the investors, and they're saying, you know, the business case for this is, oh, you can do this with less humans, you can do it faster, you can probably scale better. Like, great, make that clear in your pitch deck. But that isn't what you put on the website for the customer.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right. So let's wrap this up talking about mindset and the book. How can people apply? Yeah, obviously start with the book, get the book and read it. But how can people, what are the first steps people can take when it comes to changing the mindset of changing the box?
I, I think very distinctly about the difference between the problem space and the solution space. I think if you um, if you don't understand the problem space before you start working the solution space, you end up, fitting your solution a little too close to the exact thing that you just saw. You haven't had a chance to consider it, and you end up not actually getting where you want to be. And that's why so many projects don't go where they need to go. If you could just change your mindset to say, like, before I'm going to figure out how to solve this, I'm going to figure out more about the problem, not just what the problem is, why the problem is. How did we get here? What's the history of it? And that might only take you an extra hour. It doesn't have to be an onerous, like, let's do a 16-week study and have a whole committee put together. You don't need that. What you need is to just think a little bit more about, how do we get to this problem? Then your solution space becomes more holistic. And then you can start to say, all right, now I see how we got here. How can we fix this? How can we make sure we don't get back here? And how do I communicate to everyone the changes that we're going to make to solve this and get them on board and aligned? it really cleans things up in the brain and makes it easy to change the box. It's smallest change, biggest impact. You can't do that until you know what the impact is going to actually be.
Awesome. That's really good. That's really good, Spence. And I like to wrap these up by talking, by going a little bit behind the dedication of the book. And the dedication to the book is, Emmy, you are missed, quiet and compassionate. Happy Halloween. Would you mind just sharing with us why you decided to put this dedication in the book?
Yeah, we lost my cousin last year to a form of leukemia that was very aggressive and very sudden. The last time that I saw her before she got sick was Halloween, and it was her favorite holiday. And so I just wanted to kind of remember her and you know the the joyous moments that really embodied her life.
That's great. That's great. He is John Spencer Taylor, author of Change the Box, A Guide to Dream, Incubate, and Scale Your Innovations. Spence, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for this episode of the Authority Company podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about Spence and our other authors, please go to theauthoritycompany.com.